Starting. And here we are. It is our fourth episode of Heretics Anonymous. My name's Miguel, and I am a heretic, and I am truly delighted to be joined by another group of misfits and heretics and blasphemers and outcasts and all that. And I do believe we are live. So welcome everybody. So tonight we definitely have the pleasure of being joined by my friend, fellow podcaster. We've been on each other's show. I followed his work for years. I think he is really doing the work and might say putting the finger on the dike as the society breaks apart and floods, but he is still doing the work. He's putting that finger there, and that's Alex from Skeptico. How you doing, Alex?
Great, Miguel.
So glad you're here. And with us, we've got the Abraxas chicken wing man and the moondog himself. They're in the Matrix. How you doing, Vance?
I'm okay. Loaded for the secrets of the world here.
Yes, the secret history of the world.
Yes.
And speaking of, we are joined again by Nate the man himself, the occult fan. How you doing tonight, Nate?
I'm well, Miguel. Good evening, everyone.
Yes, good evening, everyone that are out there. And Nate, I keep thinking you still look like the guy from the movie Venom. What's the name of the actor? You're like a dead ringer for him. Who's that actor? Well, oh God, my daughter's like in love with him. I forgot his name, and he was, he was in. Well, okay, that's my. Who is calling me? All right. Well, let's get started here. I got to turn some stuff up.
Tom Hardy.
Yeah, Tom Hardy. There you go. There you go.
Oh, wow. Yes. Yes. Great actor.
So he does look like Tom Hardy. So anyway, I want to start with you, Alex. And of course, we want to, again, this show is more or less to give us a view of what has been going on this year, this 2018, as it comes to a close. Of course, you're a podcaster, so if you want to turn the tables and ask questions, in fact, I'm sure you're going to do that, because that is our nature. So if you could give us a recap of 2018 from an esoteric perspective or any perspective, what would that be?
Well, it's kind of funny because I just had a listener, a good friend. You know how we develop so many really good friends through podcasting, which is so fantastic. And one of the things I really love about it. But he was saying, wow, Skeptico's been cool. It's always a surprise. I never know what's going to come. And I'm like, gee, I hate to let you know. I mean, this is just a random walk for me, man. I'm just following, a couple of interest areas, but basically following what interests me. I don't have, it's like that line from this really old movie, because I'm old enough to remember, but Cool Hand Luke, little story from that movie, right? So he escapes, and after he gets chained up, and then he's playing the boss man. Oh yes, boss man. And then he escapes again, and the guy escapes with him because he's so taken with what he did. And he goes, man, that was your plan all along. That was you had him right in the palm of your hand. He goes, man, I've never had a plan my whole life. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm in jail. That's why my life is so messed up. And I don't know that that's that bad for me, but I never have a plan. I'm just kind of following whatever this guest says to what, hey, that interests me. And our paths have crossed lately with a couple of guests that have really sent me on a turn. Jason Horsley is one that we talked about, and Papa Joe Atwell has for the last couple of years with some of his stuff. So I'm just kind of going, I guess if I would throw one thing out there that interests me right now, and I think, again, I was excited for you to invite me on because there are so many cool things where we intersect, and I feel like you could really help maybe direct me where your thinking lies in this area. But I'll throw it out there. One of the things is I'm interested in the possibility of counterfeited spirituality. And by that, I mean, are all the spiritual, quote unquote, experiences that people are having in the extended consciousness realm, are they all real? Are they all genuine? Is there something behind that maybe is not at all like that and is being counterfeited. And what really brings that to the fore is like with Jason Horsley and Whitley Strieber and the ET experience he has, which is very dark, very straight MK Ultra thing. And at the same time, I juxtapose that with, a guy I really have grown to like and respect and he's kind of become my go-to guy on ET contact. And that's Ray Hernandez from the Free Organization, because they're the first people to put together a truly scientific study of ET contact. And they come back and say, hey, no, guys, this is spiritually transformative. This is like ET meets NDE, near-death experience. And I go, I've read the near-death experience literature, and ain't nobody being raped in a my lab situation in
No anal probes with that one.
Right. Well, any thoughts on counterfeited spirituality?
Well, I think from my perspective, I think maybe I'm understanding where you're going, because yes, I mean, how does the journey start? I mean, all of us here, we started probably in some Orthodox religion, raised Catholic, Greek Orthodox, whatever we were raised. And then we find out, well, it's not the truth. We've been lied to. At the same time, we can admit that the experiences that these individuals went seem to have been real, and they certainly the game changers out there, Teresa de Avila, St. Francis of Assisi, even Paul of Tarsus. I mean, they had experiences they shared with the world. They changed the world, and even as we leave these faiths, we can appreciate what they are and see that the church, as you were talking about Atwell and so many other guests, that it really was a fake construct. It is a fake construct, and so forth. Then we join the occult, or we start getting into occult. We join Buddhism or Gnosticism, or we become Thelemites, whatever we can. But at the same time, many of us stop there. And yes, we have the experiences, but we still buy into their narratives, somehow thinking that their narratives are true, when why would they be any different than these other institutions? I mean, you discover that Buddhist monasteries, there is a whole bunch of rape and kiddie, doing bad things to children. It's just as orthodox. As we were discovering recently, Crowley and Thelema, there seems to be a big darkness there, the same darkness that was moving Orthodox Christianity, probably dark entities, and so forth and so forth. It's almost realizing these constructs, as long as they're on Earth, will probably have some sort of rot and whatever. And I've always agreed with John Lennon, who basically said, join an institution for about a year and then realize what's wrong with it, how it's going to rot, and then jump to the next one. And always just keep moving. I mean, what do I always say? Run with those who are searching for the truth, avoid those who have found it. Keep yourself nimble and keep yourself moving. Don't buy into it. I mean, even as you said, Jason Horsley, he himself, who was always anti-guru, he got himself caught into a guru, and it destroyed, it really harmed his marriage, harmed his life, and everything. That could happen to any one of us. We can all drink some sort of Kool-Aid at the drop of the hat, and bang, here we are. So it could happen to me easily. It might be happening now. I might be drinking some sort of Kool-Aid. I don't even know it, and somebody needs to have an intervention with me or something. So that's my thoughts. What about you, Vance?
Well, you could look at the whole universe as kind of a cryptogram, that like things may look like they're making direct sense or literal sense, but you have to interpret them. So I think all these things, like I've been through the whole route of the UFOs and Whitley's Dreamland and Art Bell and the whole thing. And I even led a bunch of people up when I was younger up to the mountain. I thought the saucers were going to come visit me. How do you like that?
Wow.
They didn't come. But, there's kind of like a little quiet voice in my head that told me to do it, and I did it. So I just went to.
So Vance, are you not down with the ET hypothesis?
I will not say I know anything about what's really going on. I think there's a number. Here's one thing I really feel strongly. I feel some of the things we see in the sky are actually plasma beings. And that I came to the conclusion of before I started getting into Philip K. Dick. So, you might say, well, maybe he's going on the plasmate thing, but I am going the plasmate thing. I think some of them are plasma beings. Some of them may actually be watching what's developing on here, almost like a 3D show. Some of them may be physical, but I don't know because I don't get to see, UFOs in my
I never like the I don't know answer to any of these questions. It's like we are living our decision at the moment, whatever it is. So of course it's a given that we don't know. Don't we have to kind of skeptical you a little bit here, but don't we have to take a position that you don't know? What do you know? I mean, ET hypothesis, yes or no? What we all accept that some of them aren't real, some of them are plasma, some of the rest of it. We had a controlled disclosure. It's in the New York Times. I mean, can't we talk about it now? Do we have to have any doubt? It's in the New York Times. It was on
Look
Fox
at New
News.
York City last night with that fuse explosion, quote unquote fuse explosion.
Suppose
Come
that should
on.
be a
We
transformer.
distrust that, but maybe Alex is right. We need to take a stand. I remember I once told Echeria the story of Socrates. He said he was the wisest man to the Oracle of Delphi because he admitted he knew nothing. And she turned around and said, well, that's bullshit. You have to know something. No.
Right,
Socrates was wrong.
You want to know what I know? I'll tell you what I know. I knew two people that were part of the Manhattan Project. They're deceased now. And they lived up in the East San Jose Hills. For years, I tried to get the gal. Her husband died shortly after I met them, so I only knew her. She was a major in the Army Air Force, stationed at Roswell. So now, what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to find out, what she knows. But even whenever I asked her, hey, did you know anything about these saucers and the bodies and everything? Wouldn't even answer me. Like, made believe she didn't even hear me. Finally, one day, I was up there and with her, we had an amateur radio repeater, television repeater up there. So one day I was up there and they happened to have a talk show on the TV about UFOs. And so I'm just watching her and I said, I'm not going to talk to her about this because she never answers me anyway. She turns to me and says, they never did find those bodies. I said, oh, really? And so we had a discussion. Basically, she said the following. She said Project Blue Book was a cover story, and they put all the stupidest officers in there. There was a real unit that actually investigated UFOs for real, and there were alien bodies in there. She didn't see them, but they all knew they were there, and they were whisked away at some point. They disappeared. And I think she said she talked to the guard that was guarding the place that they were kept. And she also said that she and her husband, when they were out on deployment someplace on a ship in the ocean, saw crafts buzz the ship, and they knew there were no crafts that either we or the enemy had that were like that, because I didn't tell you what they did yet. This guy invented a lot of the high-speed, high-energy photography that they used. You know those that movie that you always see where the atom bomb goes off and the house blows over and there are people inside it? He invented the cameras and the film that filmed that, because there's a lot of energy, when the blast goes off. So they knew what they were talking about, and they dealt with gun camera film and all this other stuff that we're still not allowed to see. That's another thing I know. There's plenty of gun camera film, and how much of it have we seen? So they told me, yes, there's definitely some sort of craft up there. They're running around. Nobody knows who or what they are, so I have to keep on saying that. I've got, my suspicions, but that's what I do know, and I kind of rest on that, because these people knew what they were talking about.
Wow. Van, I can hear you fine, but Joseph and some others in the chat room say your volume is too low, so maybe work on that.
Okay, yeah, I just saw that. Thanks. How about this? Is that any better?
I think it's fine. Everybody else cool? You guys cool with that in the chat? So let us know. We're
Sounds
here
good
for
to
you.
me.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
sorry
awesome.
about that. It's the CIA turned me down. Hey, I can see my level in the little thing here. Yeah, okay. I can see it's better.
Good. And that's Ahmed as well. Talk about it too. I don't think I've ever mentioned this while we're putting our cards on the table, but my mother-in-law, she was the daughter of a colonel, and she was in Roswell during that time. And she always used to tell us this story of how she was a little girl, and in the middle of the night, her father, the colonel, walked into the room and said, everybody, we're leaving. and grabbed the suitcases, grabbed the family, went out, and she remembered all the trucks moving out and everything, and they just left Roswell. And she used to ask her dad, well, what happened? And he would not say a word. The colonel went to the grave with whatever happened that night, but she knew one day she was in Roswell, the next day they had moved somewhere to Texas. So,
Whoa.
so that's that. What about?
Miguel,
Yeah, go ahead, Nate. What say you?
well, I'd like to just cover a few things very briefly. If you see the Buddha on the road, kill him. To get back to your earlier point, I think that would be relevant. So the Indiana Jones film from 2008, the most recent one, and if Vance is too quiet, I'm sure that I'll be too loud, so we'll balance it out in the end. If you look at the Indiana Jones film, they actually use a lead-lined refrigerator because Jones gets caught up in one of those atomic blasts, and that leads us back around to aliens because sorry guys, but at the end of that film, there's some alien stuff. But what's key is that you hear them talk about how where are they going as the UFO goes up into space, and it's not going into space, they say. It's going into the interdimensional space between spaces. So I think, my card's on the table, I ascribe to the song Fayette de Awad by Tool, which is Enochian, the language of the angels. Now this is where the angel-alien cross comes. They say a guy running from Area 51 from an Art Bell show on 9/11, 1997, the famous Area 51 caller says, they're not what we think of as aliens are not aliens. They're extra-dimensional beings that have infiltrated the military government. He conflates the two. And I find that would be where I think that we're going with all of this, that we work as like a tree of life dimensional. Like this is the plane, galactic cross, plane T, planet, Earth. So we're on the plane of Earth, and these things incarnate through maybe what we call the sphere of the moon, Yesod, things like that. That's what I think aliens might be. That's where I'm at right now. They're interdimensional beings.
That would work. What do you think of that, Alex?
I always feel like kind of doing the reverse Occam's razor kind of thing. It's like when you deal with the skeptics, they're always kind of this mindless, dumbed down Occam's razor, simplest answer kind of thing. Well, when I apply that to the kind of alt extended view of things that we have, they're freaking aliens from another planet. That's the Occam's razor. So until that is, falsified to a certain extent, I just had an interview with a guy, interestingly enough, and he claims to have had contact. I don't know what to make of that, but I know where he's coming from in terms of what we did in the show. And this is an interview I did with Steve Briggs, longtime meditator, longtime transcendental meditation teacher for over 20 years. And we talked about Maharishi, and his sexual indiscretions and, what that means. And back to the thing of the guru, is always going to be this kind of trickster kind of character, sage on the stage, as my one buddy says. But, the thing about it is, and back to the Tibetans. So he's over in India, Steve is, and he's doing basically like corporate TM training. There's large, prestigious corporations who are saying, come in and train our people because we know that TM will kind of help them. And he does this, and he meets all these Tibetan lamas, and he's wandering through the hills of the Himalayas, and he meets the guy, this avatar-like kind of guy. And the guy gives him some simple exercise. And it was a physical human being. He says, okay, you need to do this breathing, and then you're quite advanced in your practice. You can do this astral travel thing. Well, we've all heard of this astral travel thing, but he actually supposedly instructs him in how to do it. And I should mention that Steve is a very down-to-earth guy, MBA, tennis coach, a very accomplished tennis player, was like a champion at University of Arizona, all the rest of this stuff. So he's like, and I could go on with these stories, but part of his first experience with an extended consciousness experience was on the tennis court. He was a young kid and
Huh.
he was playing and he was focusing really hard. We hear about, the Michael Jordan zone, and I'm dating myself, Steph Curry, who sees the basket as big as a hoop. Well, he had this experience while playing tennis, and that's what propelled him into meditation to begin with. So again, you go from the known to the unknown. We know that happens. We look at Dean Radin, and he's doing the pre-sentiment work, and he says, okay, this is how it works. We have these little time slips, and that's how they can do a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, and that's how Steph Curry can do the rest of that, and that's probably what happened to Steve. So, but then when we get to his astral travel story, we're not going to believe that. So his astral travel story involved traveling to the Sirian star system and meeting the inhabitants there. The interesting thing, if you know anything about the star system Sirius, and if you're familiar with the work of Laird Scranton, anyone familiar with Laird Scranton?
No.
Oh, shame. Okay, so one of Laird Scranton, he's a researcher, and some of his research has to do with the Dogon people. So the Dogon, right? So the Dogon are this
the Dark
tribe.
Companion. Yep, they knew about it.
Yeah.
So you're right. They're a tribe in Africa without a written language. We go, oh, well, forget them. They must be really stupid. They go, no. It's better not to have a written language. When you have a written language, things get distorted. When you don't have a written language and then it has to get passed down to the next generation, you test them. You make sure they have it. They get the whole thing in their head. Okay. But that's not the story. The story is in the late 1800s, our great colonizers, the French, Belgium, they show up as anthropology, and they say, hey, well, tell us about who you are. And they say, well, we're from this star system. Our star brothers came, and they have these masks that they dance around with. These Dogon people do, and they look like, and they say, yeah, this is what the star people were, and this is what they looked like. And they said, and we can tell you some stuff. You see that Sirius star up there? It's actually 2 stars. There's a little dwarf star that's next to it, but you can't see it. This is 1830s, right? And they go, wow, that's it. And then they draw them a picture of their art, and they say, see, there's 3 other planets that go around these 2 planets. Well, it isn't until 1970 that we have a telescope strong enough to look at the Sirius star and say, hey, there is a dwarf star there. Wow. Oh my God, there are 3 planets there. And they told us basically the composition of them and whether they rotated or not, and how long it took the dwarf star to rotate around the other one. Again, Occam's razor. They're from another planet.
I would, in my view, I would agree with Nate about interdimensional beings, but I'm going to say, and I think I've discussed it on other shows, I've had 2 extraterrestrial experiences, and seemed to be craft lights. They were definitely on this earth, but I've had haunting experiences and all that. But there was the show that you did, Alex, and it was kind of a different show, because you invited Gordon to be you while you took a step back. And that was a show with Dr. Brandenburg, I believe, Death on Mars.
Right.
His argument about civilization on Mars was so convincing
that
every time as you say, I want to go non-Occam's razor and get all mystical and interdimensional and all that good fun, I think of that interview, and I go to his side, I've read his book, and I go, damn, that's in another planet. So that's what gives me pause or sobers me up.
Well, I think it's a balancing act, because again, on Aeon Byte, what you're doing is rare, but it's the work that we all have to do. And that keeps one foot planted in everything is an abstraction. Everything is a myth that we're creating, which we all know is ultimately the only thing that it can be, right? I mean, this consensus reality game that we're playing on Hangouts here is fun, but we know that there's nothing real about it. But as long as we're going to play that consensus reality game, I think we do well to put certain, rules in place to kind of pretend like we're marching towards some logical conclusions.
Yes, we are. We are playing the game. And I think for Aeon Byte, as Jung said, the Gnostics were history's first depth psychologists. I always want to make it about the listener. In other words, yeah, you can. There's all these wild theories, but look at yourself too, where you are in your life and where you're heading to is just as important as the raw data out there, the aliens, consciousness, and all that work. So that's always been my slant for Aeon Byte. It's more of a, you might say, I don't know about a mystery religion, but maybe even a therapist couch where people can sort of find out about. At least that's my hope. Who knows if it's worked?
Would I be able to interject briefly with to connect with Alex? What you said about you kind of just follow things. You kind of follow that. At the beginning, you were talking about following. Just you don't have a plan. Things just kind of happen. And I'll tie this to two quick things. How Mark Booth on your show recently talked about providence, and we can just kind of put that in a parenthetical. Gordon White was just mentioned. In fact, I met Gordon in Hollywood in the summer of 17. And the reason I got into Gordon was I read his article, speaking of planets, about how Uranus was discovered by Herschel using his own telescopes when everyone knew that you couldn't go past Saturn. And then he discovered Uranus. I end up going out over to Hollywood to meet Gordon. And I end up where Rebel Without a Cause was partially filmed, at the planetarium over there. I believe it's, forget the name of the planetarium.
Griffith Observatory.
Observatory. Thank you, Vance. And I ended up over there. And of course, right in front of the Griffith Observatory, while I'm out there to see Gordon, wouldn't you know that there's a statue of Herschel right in the front of it?
Wow.
So these things all circle around. And I think that we shouldn't be too quick to dismiss what we call divine providence. And I would simply add also, it depends on what your conception of the planets and what Sirius is. Because I would say, why so serious about Sirius?
I saw that coming a mile away.
That's my department.
Yeah, the bad puns.
Yeah.
Hey, Nate, I'd like,
but it was a good point.
Yes.
I want to ask you a question, Nate, and this might be a little bit inside baseball because I asked you a question about Mark Booth, who I think is wonderful, just wonderful, wonderful guy and brilliant. Oxford, you can imagine him at Oxford in a philosophy class, both as a student first and then later as a teacher, because he's so smart. And yet with his kind of occulted kind of sensibility, he must have just been grinding his teeth, in the back, which is, I guess sometimes that's a motivator to take one, further. But having said that, I love it in these interviews when I stumble upon things that are kind of these skeptical moments that I can't leave behind. And in the case of Mark, he still has a very strong Christian overlay on this whole thing. And like the hard part for me to overcome, and I'd like to know what you think, is like all he is unlike most. He's a super open-minded guy, and I so respect, the Christian orientation that he has. I think it leaves a lot of meat on the bone there to still chew around with. But when you put him to the test, it's like, yes, this is the date. This is a unique time and place in history. That is, history started when Jesus was born on this day, and everything before and everything after. And it's like, really? You're going to go there? I mean, it just...
Yeah, but Alex, also the guy who wrote the intro for your book, Rupert Sheldrake, he on your show said he's gone back to Christianity. Jason Horsley on this show said he is going back to more to Christian things. So sometimes it's almost like you have to go back home and find the trauma, the beauty. I'm just putting it out there. But anyway, I know the question was for you, Nate. Go ahead.
It's a community effort, right? So no, I appreciate that. I don't mind if people have if I can't say right now I don't know, then I'll just say nothing at all. I don't necessarily know if Mark is specifically Christian per se, or if he's extremely wed to these ideas that he's been taught through these esoteric schools. Until you enter into an esoteric school, until you know what their current is and are locked into
Christian.
That vibe.
Just to be clear, he's Christian. I've had email exchanges with him afterwards. Yes, he's Christian.
What flavor?
I recall that.
I don't know. I don't know, but
Well-
he would self-identify as Christian.
My father's
So
a
do I, but-
pastor.
Yeah.
My father's a
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go.
my father's a pastor, so I'm not specifically Christian myself. But if what he's saying, because you said he had an email exchange, I recall you said that he seemed to have said something like, "Why do you have Alex have such a problem believing?" Right? That's what you mentioned at the end of the show.
Yeah, which is the other thing you always get from Christians. It's like, it's kind of endearing in a way, but they want to save your soul, like, no, it's okay. Thanks. Why are you seeking? You seem to be seeking for something. Like, fuck yes, I'm seeking. Aren't you? Inquiry can perpetuate doubt.
Oh God, you remember the "I found it" movement back in the 70s?
I'm a perpetual seeker myself right now. I try not to have any claims to answers, though I have a Leo moon, and I like to really, feel enthusiastic about things. I don't have any answers right now. I'm very open as much to Mark Booth as I am to people like Anthony Peake, and so on and so forth. So just to get around to, I guess, answering your question, I take from him, if we're going to do a level 3 type of analysis, which I really appreciate you wanting to do, and I'll give a shout out to another seeker like us named Dark Journalist, who talks about there's the front story that we're given by your New York Times, who won't publish the UFO article on their print, only on the very erasable online version. But then you also see the junk conspiracy or whatever. But then there's level 3, or between the two, the truth that wants to come out, like a no agenda thing. So I would say that I don't have an answer on behalf of Mark, but for what he's written, I haven't read a book in 10 years that I've enjoyed or resonated with as much as this. And I find myself very steadily approaching towards that idealistic origin story. If not the Christian, more of an idealistic thing. But you're talking to someone who's about to join the Rosicrucians possibly. So take that for what you will.
Noted. You know what I'd do is I'd juxtapose that with what Miguel was saying, and I want to pull you back into it, Miguel, because you have I do really respect the kind of Gnostic approach that you take, the playful approach that you take, Miguel, in terms of entering back into the Christian tradition of saying, great, here's an opportunity to rewrite my own myth, to rewrite my own gospel. And I enter it knowing that is different than entering it looking for the truth, looking for the end, looking for simple answers that wind up sounding incredibly, well, I use the term backdoor materialism. Really? Jesus's birth marked the beginning of time, and then it's reversed after that. It's like, fucking, don't we know time doesn't exist? I mean, Einstein proved that, and Dean Radin proved it again with his presentiment experiments. Why would we be talking about time? It kind of doesn't fit. And then later on, I want to talk about level 3 because it means something different to me.
Right. Yeah,
I'd like to get something in there, by the way, Miguel.
Yeah, go ahead.
On this whole thing, as I'm listening, I'm reminded why I stopped being so interested in UFOs, which is, at the end of the day, I wasn't getting any information from them that was satisfying. I'm always looking, but I wasn't finding anything, except after the MUFON meetings, we'd go, every month. They were like a few miles from my house. We'd get together, and then we have these cool discussions among each other about, with the nature of things. We had people like Stanton Friedman there, one time. I even gave a lecture one time about the Hale-Bopp comment. I did research and so forth and gave a whole presentation to them. But that's why I started turning to, the more spiritual related things, because I found that as I listened to that, it started, resonating inside me. So anyway, that's something that I wanted to point out.
No, makes sense. I mean, what exactly was your question? I mean, I understand, and I guess it's tying back to what we've been talking about Christianity in the age. I mean, it is something since Zoroastrianism that we've developed this idea of ages and starts and stops. And you're just talking about the written language. Yeah, and when you start reading Gary Lockman or John Lundwall or some of these others and talking about how, yes, the written language really changed our brain, and the idea of abstract thinking and logical thinking really stole a lot of our, you might say, holistic thinking. We were more embedded into nature. We were more embedded into the stars. And it really took something from us. Although, again, for usefulness purposes or something like that, it was good because we were able to advance relatively in our technology or all that. But then you wonder, well, maybe we just missed out on all the great technology those people from the stars were giving us when we decided to go down our own path of linear thinking. So that's what I have to say. Does that answer your question, Alex, or what you're trying to address with the Christianity and the birth of Christianity?
Well, I found that very interesting and relevant to it. I think I kind of jumped in it was having kind of almost a private conversation with Nate there, because we both were relating to Mark Booth's claim in his book, The Secret History of the World, that it has been an understanding among many esoteric Christians that the event of Jesus's birth began a clock going forward and going backward that mirrored itself. So it's a very strange idea. So like we are in the year 2000, we are mirroring 2000 BC, and that's how we should understand time. And that's a literal understanding that is in this esoteric teaching. And to me, you can't just crap all over that needlessly, but you can say, how would you ever prove something like that? Why is that? I mean, that's interesting, but I mean, again,
the age of Pisces started. I guess that's an argument esoteric Christians use. And I should say, too, that Augustine himself said Christianity has existed since the beginning of time. In other words, he knew that this myth of the dying, rising God-man renewal, logos of the Stoics was around. He just decided he was going to embrace the one that was around at the time. So I think even the more Platonic early Christians knew this was an eternal, reoccurring, cyclical. I guess they were closer to pagans, if you want to use that word.
See, that's what I love about Joe Atwell, who is most recently on your show. If you go to Aeon Byte right now, he's the interview that's queued up there. And Joe, people get a little tired of me talking about Joe Atwell because he's been on the show several times. And I think you just gotta, if you have any kind of Christian orientation in your history, I think you really got to process fully Joe Atwell. I don't buy into his complete Caesar's Messiah thing, but the thing that gets me is if you understand Joe Atwell, then you understand Josephus as this psyop. There's no other way to see it as a psyop, a control thing, and it's clear as day. And as soon as you get there, then you're like, and you guys didn't touch on it. I'd have to go back and listen to the older interview you did, but you're really knocked on your heels in a couple of ways. I think number one, you say, okay, well, gee, the whole Christian narrative as it's handed to me is just not that. Whatever it is, it's not that. But then the second thing is, how long has this game been going on? I mean, that's right. I mean, it's 2,000 years. In a certain extent, it kind of freezes from feeling that, geez, the end is, they've been playing this game forever. Don't worry about it, man. It all kind of works out.
No, yeah, agreed. And then you start wondering what other official narratives are wrong. And maybe it's just human nature to create these lies and these stories for us. And that's why here in the 21st century, we've got to find out, like I say, our own myth, our own story, at least to begin, because everything is probably, the official narrative is probably 99.9% wrong, whether it's Islam, Scientology, New Atheism. There are forces behind there. And like you say with Joe Atwell or Chris Knowles or Wood Gordon, there's always finding the puppeteers behind them who are the marketing people behind. Follow the money trail, and I think that's what you do in Skeptico. We do here at Aeon Byte, and what we're trying to do. And it's a messy game. There's a lot of tripping and friction and learning from all of us, but we are trying to get people to think for themselves. And I think hopefully all of us are doing the work. Or sometimes I think, hey, you know what? Maybe I am being controlled by the CIA or the Demiurge, and I don't even know it. I probably wouldn't even know it, or Alex is, or Vance, or even Nate. People are wondering about his scarf. There are people that are suspicious about you already, Nate, because of what you're wearing.
Scarf, yeah.
Yeah, Joe Atwell would be upset.
You know what? I should rethink this UFO thing, though, because now that I think about it, human beings are not organized enough to pull off a 2,000-year-old psyop, you know? There's something
Who
behind
said it
it.
was humans? Who said it was humans, Van?
That's what I mean. See, we call them the Archons. Alex, if you're ET-oriented, you could call them the ETs. But there's something other than humans at work here.
I don't know if they
Angels are supposedly higher dimensional intelligences, right? Angels are higher dimensional intelligences. They can allegedly manipulate a lot of us. Angels versus Aliens is a Mogwai song, I would say. Yeah.
They're words, right? They're all words.
Well, they're definitely things. There's something is up there that is, a few years ago, you would have never known. I was an atheist who thought tarot cards and the Zodiac, and I thought it was all BS. You know, I thought ghosts were BS. I thought aliens were BS. I thought, you know, you get my point. I was like the dumb side of skeptical. But now I realize that, you know, like they say, there's no zealot like a convert, and this is all real, is all I'm going to say to end that spiel.
Yeah, it's like Han Solo in the Star Wars movie. It's real. All of it is real. Even the parsecs is real as a measurement of time. In my opinion.
I don't remember that part.
Well, it was kind of a forgetful movie. But I wanted to sort of shift gears a bit because, again, this is a topic that Alex and I deal with and everybody's deal with. And I was looking through your book, Alex, Why Science is Wrong About Everything. Almost everything. Yes. And of course, I remember reading the title and going, well, let's see. Consciousness, dark matter, gene science. That's what makes up most of the universe and reality. And those are three things that science no idea about. So he's right. But then your book, it's very granular. You start breaking down how science screwed up with telepathy, precognition, you know, I mean, it just goes on, and you pretty much just break it down. Great book. And for the listeners, I will add to our audio version Alex and I's interview where we really break down his book. So you'll get that bonus too. But what I want to ask you is, and I know that I'm getting long-winded, but I need to get to this. But when I talk to a lot of my atheist friends, and a lot of them are organizers and so forth, they're telling me that atheism or new atheism is really dying. How do they know? Because the conferences are half as full, the speaking engagements are gone. You've got even Sam Harris is sort of gone with his Jordan Peterson. A lot of them are finding other work. And I think, I mean, you could make an argument, well, maybe we've become all political animals and the atheism, theism dichotomy is dying. But I think a lot of the work you've done has really, you might say, broken them, because you've been tireless for the last, 7 years, banging against scientism and atheism. But what do you think? Do you think atheism is sort of passé, if you would? Done. New atheism, sorry.
Done.
Done.
And you know what's funny about that? I'd love to think that I had any part to play in that. I don't know. I'll never know if I did or not. But I love, we all love kind of being in the echo chamber that we're in and kind of podcasting and how things come back to us that we hear filtered, through 5,000 different kind of posts and tweets and all the rest of that. It just doesn't ring. It doesn't have the same bite to it. You can read the same nonsense, like my friend Bernardo Kastrup, who is wonderfully intelligent and brilliant. Bernardo's been on your show, hasn't he?
No,
he hasn't. Okay. But he tries to keep foot in both camps and like writes for Scientific American and stuff like that. And recently they he got a skeptical attack from, Scientific American. And it was just like, it just bounces. It's, it doesn't have the same bite. It doesn't have the same, certainly doesn't have the same cachet that it did. And it's just over. We all feel and know that it's over,
Yeah. The
Let's
question
take a pitchfork in it.
What do you think, Vance? Do you see a change? Are we getting more spiritual, or what is this shift? I wish I could say it's a good thing, but I highly doubt it's a good thing. I'm skeptical.
I see chaos. I see an old order that had a stranglehold on things breaking loose, and people doing a whole bunch of other things. The atheists used to be, the foil for all the fundamentalists and extremely religious people. But I think they're losing hold at the same way the religions of, yesteryear. And we're kind of coming in, the Gnostics are coming in, pagans are coming in. And it's all mixed up right now. It's like, I used to call it the opening of the Matrix. And I don't mean the, the Matrix movie type of Matrix, the Matrix that gives birth to something else. There's a lot of chaos before something's born, right? And so things are mixing up and a lot of different concepts. It's like the lashes that have been holding the culture down have broken loose, and everything is getting mixed up, and eventually it'll settle down into something. That's my personal view of things. So the atheists, they ring hollow to me. They always have, but I think their power is diminishing along with the power of the traditional religions.
See, I don't quite see the parallel in that way. I mean, I think you can trace there was the fall of Christianity and then the rise, and it's kind of always ebbing and flowing. But Christianity really took a hit among a certain intellectual group with the whole apologetics thing, right? So they got slammed by the atheists in a very justifiable way. They just did the research and said, look, this doesn't make any sense. And Acharya S was there, and the other mythicists were there, and they were just the Joe Attwells were there, and they just hammered them on the facts. So I liken it to my old days back in the computer business. When we were selling software, you just were trying to sell it to the influencers, because if you sold it to the influencers, everything took care of itself, because everybody has a guy they go to and says, what software should I buy? What app should I download? And that's the way that's always been. And I think the same has been, the average run-of-the-mill Christian, he doesn't know, but there were the influencers who said, oh yeah, we are on a little bit of shaky ground here with Mark and the book of Mark and how it's, I digress a little bit. I think the same thing happened to atheists along the road when we said, what is their real proposition in terms of philosophically? And it's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous proposition. It's, I always put it, biological robots in a meaningless universe. It's like, well, that's falsifiable from biology. It's also just falsifiable in the sense that from a philosophical thing, I always like the Albert Camus thing, even though it's a little twisted, it's like, there's only one philosophical question: suicide. Mm-hmm. So like, hey man, if that's what you believe, huh? Biological robots, meaningless universe. Well, there's really no reason to perpetuate such a farce. You can't even suggest that, my offspring, because they would be into such a farce. So, philosophically, it completely fails, completely falls apart. It falls apart scientifically because of the whole mind-brain thing and all the stuff that consciousness completely destroys it. So I think that they lost their intellectual high ground, and once they lost that and they lost the philosophical high ground, the influencers, the people who are really ahead of the curve, said, I got to jump ship. So they all wound up still going to the conference, but the real intellectual power behind it was stripped away. And who wants to go to a conference and where the real thinkers aren't there?
Yeah, but Alex, this is what when I ask you, because again, I remember asking this to Chris Knowles, and he said, well, new atheism was something that was giving to the managerial classes in 2000. But we can also say that materialism, Darwin, that was handed to the managerial classes since the 19th century, moving us to the sort of nihilistic, materialistic thing. Do you think there's been a pushback, or it's not working, or those powers have faltered a bit, and suddenly millennials want to be Wiccans, and we all want to be Buddhists and meditate? What's going
Come on, Miguel. What do you think?
I think there has been an awakening, a slight awakening. There has been a pushback, and people are realizing, this shit is stale. Simple as that.
I've got a new theory here. Well, it's not new, an old theory. We're all forgetting most of the people on this planet are ruled by rabid atheists, and that's the Chinese. And which brings us back to the influence on the current Chinese government, which is Marx, which is endemically atheistic. So Marxism, and now in our softer, gentler social democratic forms and so forth, has atheism built into it because it breaks up cultures and so forth. And in the process of dissolving our antithetical stance to that, we have opened the matrix to our openness, and we can be Gnostics and so forth because they've broken down all the old restrictions. Think of the Victorian era. Yeah, you even in the Renaissance, they wouldn't dare say, "Oh, we're atheists" and so forth. They were maybe had gentler versions of Christian religion, but everything were Christian countries and this and that. Now the Muslims, of course, they have their own brand of fundamentalism, but Marxism made a point of calling religion the opiate of the people, and in the process of breaking it up, allowed actually freedom. And now they expect to come in and into that chaos and atheize it, make them atheists. So we can't forget the influence of the Marxists, and that's what
I think there's a third way to that, Vance, which would be you have your and I think and I realized the third way that I was talking about earlier was not your way, Alex. By the way, I realized that. But I'll say this, and then I'll drop it. There's the dogmatic. There's the Tool album Opiate of the Masses type people. It's actually an EP. But then there's a third way, which is the esoterics. So there's actually a third, and I would argue, and this is just one man's opinion, that what's actually going on behind the scenes is the esoteric ruling class. Not the atheist, that would be stupid. Not the dogmatized, that would be stupid. But the esoteric. That's what I would just like to respond with that. That's all.
Yeah,
do we have one? I hope so.
So what about you, Alex? What do you think about this? Faltering, what happened?
Well, I was going to kind of jump on what you were just talking about a minute ago, Miguel, and it kind of, I guess, relates a little bit to Nate's point. But it's the interesting thing, again, about Atwell, I think, and because I love Joe's contribution. It's massive. And at the same time, I sometimes don't come to the same conclusions he does, because I think he can kind of become a little bit dogmatic in the conspiracy stuff. So what you just said, Miguel, I think it's a mixture of that. So I think intellectually the atheists failed, and that eroded their power. And at the same time, the social engineering oligarchs, as Atwell likes to call them, found them less useful because of that. And these things kind of work together. I mean, like, one of the things that just always kind of annoys me about Joe, and I say that because I consider him a friend, and I got to have him on again soon about his new book, but his take on the whole psychedelic entheogen thing as a psyop, which no doubt it was. But if we leave out the fact that there is this extended consciousness reality, and that sometimes we have tools that allow us to access that extended conscious reality in a way that we didn't before, then maybe our maybe our CIA controllers didn't know what the heck they were doing when they released this, and it propelled us into that extended realm in a way that they hadn't controlled for. And that to me seems like a much more likely scenario there. And I think that applies here too. It's not like they had some grand master plan for atheism to decline so that they could then replace it with something else. They're reactive, not proactive in that way. I just, okay, well, that's how the thing is going, boom. It's like Joe Atwell's wonderful thing on feminism, and you get into, and it's not him. I got to quit attributing everything to Joe. He's getting more credit than he deserves. But, Gloria Steinem is CIA.
Yeah,
I mean,
black and white.
process that. She admits it now, well, I had to for the cause, really, so, but the point being, okay, what game is, why are they playing that game? And I would suggest that they're playing that game not because they know the outcome, but because they don't know the outcome. And they want to have a seat at the table. So if it flips this way, they have a play. And if it flips the other way, they have a play as well. And that's how I would understand the rise and fall of atheism. They don't care.
Yeah, and like you said, they are reactive and they have the same formulaic playbook.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it works well because I'm thinking, well, what are they doing now? And what they're doing now, to an extent, I think is working. What are we finding? Oh boy, why don't we go back to the Cold War? It's the Russians that are doing it. Why don't we get into sort of that 60s divisive mentality? Let's put the Proud Boys and Antifa against each other, and everybody has to sit on one side and root for one team. So it's almost like they're getting more desperate. They're upping the ante, and they're really trying to. Well, again, like Van said, they're really trying to infuse some chaos. But whether it's working or not, I think to an extent it's working. But we just, alternative media and so forth, we have to keep pushing back and say, we are all equal and we should all be united down here on the ground as middle class, lower class people.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I got to jump in there. I know I've talked a lot, but I got to jump in there because this is like you were leading up to a point that I really wanted to agree with, and then you took a turn, and I want to kind of go skeptical on you here.
Go for it. Awesome.
I see a parallel, a line to be drawn between the atheistic, academic, biological robot, meaningless universe, science materialism thing that is still holding on to in academia. I mean, that's still the dominant paradigm, even though it's really crumbling. We all know that's not there. And what I would call the libtard conspiracy, and people hate that, libtard, oh my God, you're so offensive. No, it's a shutdown of thinking. It's like this academic paper recently that was published, made the news about the dog park. And these guys were just trying to, I don't know if you've heard this, but the dog park.
Watch out, Vance has Pepe behind him. You've summoned Keck, Alex.
So the dog
2 years
park,
ago, Greg Carl released a Keck episode actually to this day, 2 years ago.
Anyway, go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, Alex.
So if you guys aren't familiar with it, the study that was, made it through peer review as a way to show the absurdity of the kind of.
Yes, it was a parody study.
Yeah. Was it, if you just jam enough words in there of the, it was that dog parks promote rape culture because men who go there and see random sex between dogs, it perpetuates this idea that men need to dominate and all the rest of this. And this gets into review. So,
but I take my wife to the dog park before we want to get romantic. Doesn't everybody do that? Doesn't everybody? I'm sorry.
Well, the parallel, if I can dig myself out of this hole that's probably going to piss people off, is not that there isn't it's like the whole thing we're just talking about, the feminism. I mean, is anyone saying that feminists weren't fundamentally right? That, the depriving women of basic rights is not a good thing, so there needed to be a social change there. But when the CIA is engineering it, you're like, oh, well, what's really going to happen here? I think the same thing is happening here. So the academia, this liberalism, and we've both had guests. You've had several on your show, and I've had mine that I like and respect, and wrote blurbs on my book that have kind of gone off into a kind of crazy zone where they're just nothing really makes sense. They're kind of grasping onto stuff. And here's the parallel that I would draw. That's scientific materialism at a different part of the university. That's what I think is one of the cards that is being played, because when we're in this world of nothing making sense in academia, and you're sitting there and going, oh, it's rape culture and Me Too, and all this stuff that doesn't make any sense, then it has that way of just kind of scrambling us a little bit, in the same way that when they told you, you're a biological robot in a meaningless universe and you don't really have any love for your children, that's just your brain firing. There's no such thing as love. So these things have a way of kind of getting deep into our soul and kind of deconstructing us in a way.
Yeah, and I think
you're not wrong.
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say there's a guy called Black Pigeon Speaks who I would suggest people check out. And what is it? Retweets aren't endorsements, but check out Black Pigeon Speaks and look at the Harvard study that was done on him. I'll draw the analogy between how the new atheism is falling apart. Well, so is the critical university accolades or gravitas. Because if you look up Black Pigeon Speaks and the Harvard study that was done on him, it's a picture perfect example. Oh, I'm doing that right. Of what
you just expose yourself even more.
Of what you're saying, expose myself even more. What? Of what? Of what? Let's all behave, baby. Alex, all I'm saying is it's a picture perfect example of what you're saying. Sharks with frickin' lasers. Anyways, it's what you're saying. Black Pigeon Speaks. I would check out his work. He's a vegetarian Canadian who lives in Japan. Canadian in Japan, like James Corbett. But the point is he goes around like helping pigeons. He's a really good individual soul who recognizes that what you're calling this over liberalization, there's hot and cold. Let's have two hemispheres of our brain firing, not just one or the other, right? Anyways, so to your point, look up Black Pigeon Speaks and the Harvard study that was done on him for a parallel of what you're saying. That's all.
Well, cool. Very cool. And I definitely want to keep shifting gears here because, well, time is of the essence and we're having fun. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Alex, and that's the interesting, I haven't really gotten to ask others about it, maybe in private, but remember the whole Pizzagate thing and how fascinating it was and how it really charged most of culture and all that. And I remember being completely fascinated by it, although I never really, you might say, decided one way or another, simply because I was like, well, this is not a victimless crime. I need to see the bodies. When I see the bodies, the DNA, then yes, but until then, I'm just going to speculate and entertain it. But it was very powerful and it got everybody really excited. And then it sort of fizzled out and it seems to have lost itself, although it has shed light very much on the whole pedophilia. I mean, we do know for thousands of years that children have been sacrificed to the gods, to Moloch. They've been used as sex slaves. I mean, we do know that for hundreds of years, children are seen as soul power, energy power, or forms of beauty that need to be used. And at the same time, this has brought in a lot of darkness and evil from other places. But what do you think we miss with Pizzagate and how it fizzled out? I mean, what do you see the powers or forces playing behind this whole idea?
Boy, there's so much there to kind of, I hate to deconstruct all the time, but really to pull apart in so many ways. The first thing, let me just lay out some facts. First thing to understand about Pizzagate is it is a political operation, clearly. there the series of emails that are released 4 days before the election that reveal that Hillary is into spirit cooking and esoteric, Luciferian at the least, Satanistic, probably kind of practices. And her main friend, our buddy, what's his name?
Podesta.
Senior moment. John Podesta is really, is leading the charge. So, I mean, I think what people skip right away is, that was an operation. They were trying to expose it because we know one thing that made Hillary unelectable. To be elected president of the United States, you have to be Christian. That's just the way it is. It might change in the future, but it certainly isn't going to change in this election cycle or the next election cycle. That's what resonates with enough of the voters out there. So it was an operation to do it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't true. And the people who push back on Pizzagate and said it isn't true, at this point, they look ridiculous. At this point, it's clearly factually shown. In those emails, one of the little quirky things is you have John Podesta emailing Dennis Hassert. So John Podesta is, of course, a Democrat, and Dennis Hassert was the head of the Republican Party a few years before him. Their only connection is pedophilia. Hassert is a convicted pedophile that the judge at his sentencing said that he was so disgusted because he had to give him a reduced sentence because he had pled down to a reduced charge, but he wanted it to be on the record what a slime ball this guy was. We should also point out that there's different kinds of pedophiles. In recent months, I've come to have to accept that Trump and Lolita Express and Jeffrey Epstein, that's not stuff we can look past. And he's a creep. He's a perv. But there's a different flavor of this too that is about not just abusing, but it's about violence. It really isn't about sex. So Trump bringing over 15-year-old girls for his quote-unquote modeling agency and hitting on them, I don't know if that's different, but it is different than guys who are going and sourcing 4-year-old boys. And what are you going to do with that? It's just, it is in my, to getting back to where it's really important without diving into the abyss too far. It clarifies for me evil in a way that we can start to understand, because at least in my world, sometimes you get people on and they'll want to kind of fluff around the evil, and there's just kind of this amorphic consciousness and stuff like that. You go, no, wait a minute. Here's the FBI guy I interviewed who infiltrated NAMBLA, and these guys are sitting around visiting Toys R Us and looking at 6-year-old boys and 3-year-old girls and talking about the nasty, mean, violent stuff that they're going to do. Hey, man, that's evil. We don't have to look any further. We don't know what the source of it is. We don't know if they contracted in their soul group to do this or if they're playing out. I don't know. But at least we can point to something and say, that's evil. We kind of understand now that we have a dividing line that we can kind of go to. So where Pizzagate goes from there, a lot of different directions. I'll leave a couple little crumbs, though. McMartin was real. Satanic ritual abuse, much more prevalent than that's a deal there, that they want us to look past that. Oh gosh, the satanic panic. Ha ha ha. You guys think, well, of course, from our atheist humanist thing, there's no such thing. It's just real. There's no way to get around it. If you look into the McMartin thing, if anyone doesn't know, I can't go back to that whole story. But the kids at McMartin had STDs. These are high school kids. They have STDs. Oh, okay. Maybe all the parents, they have, all the medical kind of things that show up from that. So the fact that was papered over, that we presented those people on 60 Minutes to get their, the holy water thrown on them. Oh, do these really look like child molesters? False memory syndrome. All of that shit was thrown all over it. if you don't believe me, just dig deeper. And again, it's staring into the abyss, but you don't have to dig very far to go, oh my gosh, maybe that's more real than I thought. I laid a lot on the table. Anyone else have anything?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
do.
go ahead, Vince.
Number one, it's happening somewhere. The really question is who and to what degree. Number two, if you take the combination of power, right, political power especially, and immorality, i.e., not thinking there's anything higher to answer to, that we're just meat machines, meat robots, those two things combined result in that kind of thing. Because, hey, why not? Anything you can get away with. So I think it's perfectly credible. I haven't researched all the evidence. I suspect it's true, but I'm biased in that direction. I'm biased to think that the people in Pizzagate really did that. And there are some things that we all know did happen about Bill Clinton going to that weird island, right? Many trips. That's never been refuted. So that's it. Power plus disconnection with the divine. That's what, that's evil. That's what causes this evil.
Yeah, and inflicting immense trauma to open whatever gates you want to open and break down and create eventually an army of unfeeling people, a whole culture. So what do you think, Nate?
I am frankly, I'll keep this quick. I'm frankly disgusted by anyone who hurts women or children. That's just where I come from. This is extremely hard to listen to whenever it comes up. I will recommend a very long but useful documentary that I found out through Forbidden Knowledge TV. That's Alexandra Bruce. The name of the documentary is Imperium. It's a 10-part amalgamate documentary that goes up till 2018 with Ronald, I believe, Bernard. Ronald Bernard. He made it very high up in the monetary world. But then when they asked him, according to his story, to get into that kind of behavior, the filth, as I'll call it.
He's Dutch, right?
He
He's
chose
from the Netherlands, right? He's a banker. He's a Dutch banker from the Netherlands. Yeah.
I believe he was.
Yeah.
So Imperium spans up till that point. So I'll just want to add that in the I believe that pop culture tells us a lot. So we have the secret history of the world. There's the secret history of Twin Peaks. And the reason I bring this up, please, is that Kubrick, you see where I'm going with abuse and child abuse in Kubrick, the way that Eyes Wide Shut, it's a very subtle nod, but the daughter goes off with 3 men. And I'm going to tie this into a documentary I want people to watch that is related to the secret history of Twin Peaks, Kubrick, as well as Bohemian Grove, which Alex Jones, the original Bill Hicks, Alex Jones, I don't know which one it is. Another dead hero, right, Tool? The idea is that if you look up Bill Hicks, Kubrick, and the secret history of Twin Peaks, this gets back into the pedophile stuff because Johnny Gosh is one of the most famous stories of the boys who disappeared. And Hunter S. Thompson comes into all of this, and the vampiric adrenochrome and the getting high off of eating human body parts. All of these things tied together into one macabre festival of the most disgusting, potent evil you can imagine. So I'll leave it for people hearing this. You're going to want to go out and look at that. If you think Tracy Twyman gets into some dark stuff, this is like the bullseye of again, it's just a thing. This is like the bullseye of the worst of the creature habits you can imagine. And I'll just come back around to where I started. This is the stuff that we should stamp out if we can. If there's anything that we can do that's good, it's cultivating kindness and compassion in people so that they no longer, exactly what I'm saying, kindness, compassion, and care, and they're cremating care in what Vance is showing us. So I think my point is made clear.
And what is this? It's called Imperium. It's a documentary.
There's 2 documentaries I just recommended, and I can definitely give you them for the links section below.
Yeah,
Imperium is one of the documentaries, and the other one is I'll have to get back to you on the actual title, but it goes into the secret history of Twin Peaks, Kubrick, and other topics of the like. So yeah, that's what I have to say on that. I would love it I unfortunately, well, it's not unfortunate, but it is the nature of reality that you cannot have good without evil. So there might be a perpetual battle that we're in, but I hope that you can understand which side of that battle that I have chosen.
And that's tricky. Miguel, what do you think about that? I mean, because you have that Gnostic sensibility, you know, when you're pinned to the mat on the battle of good versus evil, I just imagine you have some things to say about that.
Yeah, I would say yes. I do think there is ontological evil. I think it's empirical when you look at the world, when you look at things happen. It's interesting, and I don't know if it should be out soon, but when even somebody like Carl Jung, towards the end of his life, and writing letters to Bill W., the founder of AA. And this is when Jung was he was ending his life. So he could say what he wanted to say because he was a senior. And he actually does say that there is something called archetypal evil. It should be out in the show next week. In other words, even Jung is finally admitting there is a force of darkness in this world and not the provatio bona of Augustine, the lack of God. So I think where I stand today, I would say yes, there is definitely darkness. I guess Grant Morrison called it the outer church and the invisibles. There's two forces, although at the end they're both one and the same heavenly.
So tie that last sentence together. I mean, is the one actor leaving the stage so the other actor can enter the stage, or is it,
That's what worries me. Sometimes I wonder they might be one and the same, and we don't have any good. We are the good.
I think
we are the ultimate rebellion and the fallen angels, humanity. Maybe we're the big mistake in the cosmos because we're not going to obey. We're not going to be good sheep to the slaughter, and we're just going to try to be this thing called good instead of industrial and obedient, I suppose. So, wouldn't surprise me.
It's all life is what does Shakespeare say? This is a stage that we're on. I realize that ultimately it probably does come to the same thing, but at the same time, I'm compelled by how I feel, whatever that is. I would want, if someone was trying to rape a kid in front of me or try to hurt my child, that would be game over for them.
I hear you.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it certainly would be hard. And just real curious. Do you see any good any questions or comments from the comments section, Vance, that you might want to ask? That somebody have an issue or question with Alex, Nate, or myself?
The only thing I saw, there's a lot of discussion. I can't pick out any particular questions. There was one thing that popped out at me. Somebody said that. They were sticking up for their atheist friends when we were back talking atheism, because they're kind and honest and so forth. And that's one thing that, and then that her friend doesn't tell people that he's an atheist because she doesn't want, she doesn't want to be judged. And I can see that because I think people that don't have a lot of power, that still feel moral bindings and so forth, could be just as good as atheists as anybody else. It's the combination of the atheism and the feeling of power. Imagine these people in Washington or whatever, these big corporate guys, whoever it is, they have power. They command all this money, and money is power, and they command all these people, and they get to feeling like they can do anything, and there's no bonds on them anymore, and they don't, including any divine bonds. That's where I think atheism, can dip into the evil. I guess I faded into an editorial there, but
no. Let me interject some, because you make a great point, and I've had many atheists on the show who I respect and admire the courage that comes for standing up for that. The ability to express oneself. And I can be kind of flippant, and I kind of goes with this territory of trying to be, really trying to see this big picture stuff. Man, if you live in, my wife's from Alabama, I was saying before, and she's a forensic psychologist with a PhD, so she's about like barefoot and pregnant. But if you go back to her town, which is a good town, it's Dothan, Alabama, and stuff like that, you ain't no fucking atheist. You can't walk out and say, I'm an atheist. You cannot do that.
No.
And the people who do it are brave as crap to say, because the essential, and I remember when I first started listening to your show, Miguel, which is a long, long time ago, and you had a lot of atheist kind of friends. And I have to give you credit for helping me understand that level of deep truth seeking that goes with some of that atheism is a counterbalance to this kind of wacky Christian kind of stuff. So no, I'm down with my atheist brothers and sisters.
Good deal. Good deal. Yeah. And of course, as I was saying, I'm talking about new atheism, materialism. We're not talking about classic atheism, which I feel, my father was an atheist, completely different than what atheism is today. He simply made a decision one day. I am going to live atheist. I'm going to live my life without God, without religion. I'm going to keep my mouth shut and just go about business. And I'll worry about what happens on the other side. I thought, well, that's an honest way of living. Of course, my mom was a very Orthodox Catholic, but they made it work as long as they didn't really, when it came to metaphysics, they didn't cross paths. It was simple as that. So.
You know what? There's the two kinds too. There's the hard, I call them the hard and the soft atheists. The hard atheists are these, biological robot guys. There's nothing but, consciousness, phenomena of the brain, blah, blah, blah. But the soft atheists, I think, don't believe in the old man in the sky with the throne and so forth. You know what I'm talking about. In other words, what the traditional religions teach. But they have a feeling there's something out there, like Einstein, I think, was a soft atheist. He had wonder of the universe, and he didn't have any particular illusions of a big person running the universe, which is what usually people think God, is. But I think the soft atheist doesn't go and say, oh, there's nothing higher than human beings or consciousness either. They may not know, but of course that's really an agnostic. But I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And another thing I wanted to throw at you, Alex, and have you noticed as a podcaster a shift in how people are reacting to you? This is what I found out, and I'm sure I'll get this from this show because of the topics. But there was a time when if I had a guest, people would either judge the guest like, oh, this guy sucks, he's an atheist, or he's a Christian and he's going to hell, or they would judge my introductions. Oh man, you're out of your mind with this superstitious stuff. Oh, you're a satanic and you're going to burn in hell. Love Allah and love Yahweh and whatever. Now there seems to be this strange guilt by association. And I don't know, and I don't know why it's happening, but now people aren't just saying, even though I'm very clear about my positions on mythicism, Gnosticism, politics, they're saying, well, you automatically agree with the guest, and now they're actually coming out and telling me that I should not give certain people a platform. Just straight out, do not give a platform. In the old days, they were fine with just broadcasting, but now it's become... It's almost like they're gunning after the show. There was guilt by association, and they're actually telling me not to give certain people platforms on whatever side they are. Have you noticed that at all, or do you worry about that?
Yeah, that's scary stuff. It's the Alex Jones thing, and I just don't understand why we aren't all in the streets protesting, no matter what you think of Alex Jones. And I just had an interview with a guy who, just hates Alex Jones. I'm like, talk about canary in the coal mine. Here is someone, if someone told us 10 years ago that we can just vaporize someone overnight, that Apple, Facebook, Twitter, PayPal, they can all get together and just decide one person who is, super high in terms of the podcast count and all that's had some of the highest ones. They're gone. we would have said that is not possible. 10 years ago, we go, that is not possible. We will be in the streets with that.
No, it's free speech. How could that happen?
It is. And then they reframed, well, these are private companies. It's like, well, the newspapers are private companies too. We've always held this certain public square and the ability to have this public discourse as being something special in our society. And I'm not a big Alex Jones fan, and he's totally gone Trump on us. He used to be this kind of conspiracy guy who was and he's not that anymore, but that's a whole different story. The point is, canary in the coal mine. I mean, this is just, I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. And maybe it'll just, something else will emerge and it'll all take care.
And I agree with you. I mean, there's almost this Orwellian, we can shut you out. I mean, I don't agree with what they did with Alex Jones. I have never actually watched one single episode of Alex. I mean, I used to watch like him having a meltdown, like those 10-second clips of him exploding.
Yeah.
But actually his content and his vitamins and his theories, I never paid that much attention. I'd rather listen to Skeptico or something else, something more better. But it is, I think things have changed. And it's this, we will shut you out anymore. It's not so much about, well, let's listen to people's ideas. I disagree with this person. I can turn off the show. Now it's like, oh my God, how dare you promote alternative thinking or something that might disturb or offend me. How dare you?
That's where I was trying to draw the line between the libtard conspiracy in academia, and if you don't like libtard, neoliberal or whatever, social justice warrior, whatever. And I'm not, all those people have a point. They've been, the intellectual foundation of their point is totally stripped away, and it's now just a megaphone to go and carry out an agenda that you just don't feel like it's their agenda. This is, again, Gloria Steinem, CIA feminism. We want feminism. We want rights for women, but we want to, what is the game? What is the CIA playing here? And why does it come out all fucked up when at the end? So we want the liberal the liberal arts to thrive, and we want all the good things that have come out of that more broad thinking. We want that to thrive, but what's coming out of it now is just this craziness that manifests itself in the form of what you're talking about. Is no, we shouldn't have freedom of speech. We shouldn't give anyone a platform to talk about anything that might trigger or harm someone else. It's like, how would you ever say anything about it? Well, that's discourse, right?
And we should be careful, because when you listen to like the work of Thaddeus Russell, I think I'm saying his name right, but he documents how before a war, there was always a movement to stifle free speech. The same people giving the managerial classes their orders. And so this could be that sort of sucking sound, silence or undertow before the wave crashes. It's like, we need to start curtailing free speech because something big's on the horizon. So,
it was the Nazis who burned books. It was the Nazis. I'm in the process tonight of watching The Last Crusade, and they have the scene with the burning of the books synchronistically. But I would call it the evolution of histrionics. And for just to shoot past the point, it's also synchronistic that you mentioned a megaphone. Because Alex Jones in the movie Waking Life, 2001, Richard Linklater, Texas director. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm a dictionary or something. Encyclopedia. And the idea is that Alex Jones is in that film shouting through a megaphone his points, going crazy. This is way back in the David Icke days, right after 9/11, mind you, when World Trade Center 7. Sorry. But anyways,
he's always been anti-war, Alex Jones, and that's probably again. Why do we get rid of Kennedy? Why do we get rid of Martin Luther King Jr.? Every time a big figure goes against a war, he's got to go. That's how I feel.
Yeah, the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower's famous for. So, but Vance is right to show us the NPC. And I love it when Adam Curry on No Agenda goes, Orange Man bad. Because they got this, there's this Philip K. Dick book that I just saw mentioned by someone on Twitter today. talking about how they were getting annoyed in the book about the PC predicting their text for them, and these guys are called NPCs, and basically the is that the text supersedes their ability to argue, and they've become the very fascists punching people in the street, that they're afraid of. Like the X-Files tag said, accuse the others of that which you are guilty.
Yeah. The penultimate, what's it? Penultimate, I can't even pronounce it.
Penultimate.
Truth.
Penultimate.
Yes.
Just think of the pen
Well,
is mightier than the sword.
Yes.
Ultimately.
You speak of. Oh, I'm sorry, Vance.
No, go ahead.
You speak of podcasters, and I've just launched my podcast based off of a tarot card, the Six of Swords, which ironically is known as the Science card. So I just thought that it was very, somehow strangely, mystically circuitous. I'm using an esoteric object, which is named after science for one of its meanings. But I understand exactly, and I'm facing down the same barrel. I don't care who I bring on, frankly, but I knew that's what you were going to go with when you got around to saying, guilt by association there. That's the evolution of histrionics. It's the new level of, it just makes sense with the lack of ability to critically think and to have respect for a balanced discourse and dialogue. People are so separated. This is the screen. This isn't looking in the eyes. It's that Netflix 5 seconds rule. It's the same evolution. It's demiurgic. It's archonic. And we need to rail against it by using human empathy and soul-based exchange. That's the real earned success in science, the science of empathy, of compassion, of care. That's what we're lacking when you can just walk up to someone and say, how dare Miguel, Alex, or Vance have them on their show? It's like, really, it's infantilization. It's an army of infants.
Yeah, and it's growing, I feel. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. What do you think, Alex?
I don't know, to go skeptical for one last time on it. One of the things that does intrigue me as well is that, let me back up and talk what level 3 discussions mean to me. And I like what Nate said. I thought that was good too. But level 3 to me is just my own path in Skeptico. So, level 3, I started out and it's like, oh, science is telling me that it's biological robots in a meaningless universe. I mean, that is what they were saying without, I'm not making that up. So then, you go to the parapsychologists, you go to Dean Rader, and you go to Rupert Sheldrake, and you say, well, actually, we've done experiments, and we've proven by their same rules that that isn't true, that is dogma. So, level 1 is, here's what they're saying. Level 2 is, well, no, that isn't true by their rules. That isn't stand up. And then level 3 to me is the conspiracy. That there is a conspiracy. Why is that? Why did that dichotomy exist? Why there was this falsehood, and then as it was revealed and proved to be false, why did the whole game get played out that way? And that's where I think it gets really interesting. And it gets interesting on a couple of dimensions. One, it gets interesting from the spiritual dimension, which is what Aeon Byte is comfortable moving fluidly in and out of all these different ways of looking at that extended kind of thing. But it's also interesting to me from kind of a Machiavellian conspiratorial thing. I mean, I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but it's like when I hear people talk about eugenics, it's like, yeah, I get all that. But does anyone think we don't have a population problem? Does anyone think that the planet can sustain 20 billion, 30 billion, 40 billion? I mean, you keep drawing the line out there, and at some point you say the whole thing's just going to kind of tilt or something.
I think it can. I'm not, overpopulation does not concern me at all.
Wow. I mean, I just think have you ever seen the charts in terms of electricity usage and, what that does? And again, I don't have any, please don't have any of the eugenic stuff. I'm just saying, to me, I don't believe in the global climate change thing narrative, completely constructed control mechanism to get us to trade to track carbon. But what that if there is any reality to it, there is some limit to what we can do to our planet. The 90% reduction of fish and sea life and stuff like that. It can't, maybe technology will continue to solve the problems, but at some point it is sensible to say that there probably is some practical limit there. And my point, before it gets too diluted, is that, I love the line, you don't deserve the truth. So you can't handle the truth, Jack
Nicholson. Yeah.
But there's you don't deserve the truth. You haven't entered the arena either intellectually or in terms of your deeds or your actions. I don't have to. Now, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about someone who is in that ruling elite, oligarch, whatever. They're like, dude, you don't know. I protected you from this force. I protected you from the Russians when they were attacking. I protected you from the Chinese. And you know what? They would have chopped your freaking head off. And if you want to go live in Chi-Com and be picked up by a death squad and eliminated tomorrow, you go do it. I'm not saying this is my political stance. I'm just saying there is a political Machiavellian reality there that we sometimes want to step over in an attempt to kind of expose the evil, stuff like that. Well, some of that evil is being, if it was laid out to you, you'd say, well, yeah, okay, go ahead, Obama, who set off more drone strikes than anyone in history. All right, I guess you should have droned that wedding after all. It didn't sound like a good idea when I first heard it, but now that you've explained it to me, you have my blessing to drone that wedding reception. If you know what I mean. Do you know what I mean? I'm not endorsing that. I'm just saying, do we really want to look into that? I mean,
yeah, we have to. I mean, I don't know else what we're supposed to do. We just got to keep moving forward. I mean, it just looks more complicated by the moment, but I guess as always, best of times, worst of times, and our descendants will complain about politicians as much as we do, and maybe same as it ever was. I don't know. Maybe we're just too in it, and so maybe sometimes just talk to a senior citizen or something and find out what's going on. See what the kids have to say about the future. So, yeah, just my humble advice. So, as we end here now, because we're killing it, we're moving forward. I want to go around and maybe some predictions for 2019 or hopes or what you might have in store. So how about you, Alex? What's going on with Skeptico? What do you think is going to happen in 2019 if you could read your tea leaves?
As far as what's going to happen, I don't know. As far as what's going on in Skeptico, I'm really interested in this, what I said at the beginning, this idea of ET being a part of this spiritual transformative experience for people. And I'm interested in understanding how much of that is real and what that says about, as you put your finger on right at the beginning, spiritually transformative experiences in general. I mean, if ET can engineer those with some advanced technology, is that what's going on? Is that other, that's an area that interests me.
Yeah, well, hopefully you'll keep exploring it. And I forgot who's the scholar. She's coming out with a book this year where she says how most of our translations of Teresa de Avila are wrong. They've changed it. But when you look at the original translation, she's talking about circles around her, and basically she had a very UFO experience. So again, we're sort of looking at, obviously you're going to go down this road this year, Alex, and again we'll find out a lot, so keep doing that.
We should do something together on that. If you get interested in it and you run across the right guest, I'd love to do something.
All right, I know exactly the guest. She's coming out with a book this year. Jeff Kripal endorsed her, and it's basically a book out. She's basically, I can't remember her name. She ties in all these medieval and ancient things to modern UFOs. And she looked at the primary texts and the translations. So she's trying to, again, understand the whole extraterrestrial experience and what it does to individuals. So yeah, let's work on that one. We'll loop you in for this when I talk to her. So I don't know. What about you, Vince? Any crystal ball for 2019?
Well, I was going to say no, but I do have one prediction I can stand on because I'd be delighted if I was wrong. There won't be anything new in the UFOs. There won't be any proof, no new evidence, no smoking gun, no disclosure. Nobody's going to tell us anything new about it. It's going to remain elusive behind the scenes. And I think that probably there'll still be an ongoing attack on our freedoms, which I see as mounting. And there's going to be more of what we saw earlier about censorship. And there's going to come to a head. There might even be a revolution. And that's about all I have to say about 2019.
Wow, awesome. What about you, Nate? What's on your radar?
So I'll just say a few things. Expect more Six of Swords episodes coming out on the 6th of each month. If I say six a third time, that's 666. So someone's going to get freaked about that, and that's fun. I would say that I'm working on a project based on a Tool album right now that is a rearrangement of Lateralis, and it's called The Holy Gift. And what you talk about with extraterrestrials or interdimensionals and spiritually transformative experiences, this is all tied in at the crux of actually what I'm talking about in this holy book that I'm trying to write, like a Bible, that the intention is to hopefully have it out in my 34th year, which is a Fibonacci year. And I intend to write it for Alex Gray's Chapel of Sacred Mirrors to be the holy book of that. So if I'm on my best behavior, I'll get that out this year. But it ties in directly with what you all are saying. And if you're doing that about the UFOs and the transformative, leave it to the end for me to not stick the landing. Transformative experiences, I would love to be a part of that as well. That's at the near and dear to my heart. I'll finish with this. Look for me because I can't predict what's going to happen in the world, but I can tell you what I intend to do. So what I intend to do is to really press people to really try to focus on the present moment, be in your body, be in yourself, don't overthink things, try to be compassionate and expand your awareness the best you can. Don't buy into fear, don't buy into prejudice. Instead, look for the raising of your own consciousness, because in the end, to quote the Tool album I'm writing about, The Holy Gift, you will come to find that we are all one mind, capable of all imagined and all conceivable. So spiral out and rediscover communication.
Well said. I love it. I think on my end, I'm going to have to ask my handler. What did I just say that? Never mind. No. I'm going to say that. 2018 was a hard year, a year of change, a year of loss for me, and I think what I did is I pushed back by trying to create more and reaching out to more people. That's why I started Heretics Anonymous. I tried to put more podcasts. For some reason, it's almost like I was losing myself, so I had to give to the world more to find myself. I know it may sound hokey, but it worked. I mean, whatever challenges and depressions I was going through, I was able to turn around by just creating better art than the creator gods, as I like to say, and keep writing my own myths. So I hope to continue that in 2019, and like Alex, just take me where it needs to go. And I think, but of course, I do agree with Vance. I think that whatever's been given to the managerial classes might be far worse than materialism and new atheism, far more wicked. And yeah, we got some stormy times coming in this country, but we just got to keep what we're doing. We got to fight the good fight, finish the race, and keep the faith, as Pseudo Paul says in Timothy. So, but anyway, I think I really appreciate being here. This has been a wonderful evening and night. I will have the audio version of this soon. It is out on YouTube. And again, as a bonus for members and patrons, I will add Alex's interview that we did a few years back. So now we get granular on his book, on the different chapters. And of course, there's a lot about scientism and the history that's been given to us and all the blue pills that they've stuffed up our asses and our ancestors' asses for many years. So, Alex, thank you so much. It's so wonderful always to talk to you.
Miguel, you are a constant source of inspiration, and you're always on my pod player. I can't tell you that I'm always
Ditto.
like taking notes, and you've influenced me, and you continue to do so with your amazing guests.
Well, thank you. Right back at you. Yes, every week I've got, or 2 weeks, I got Skeptico to listen to. And Vance, thanks for being here as always, you and the Matrix.
Thank you very much. And I want to shout out to everybody in the chat room on YouTube. So many interesting things going by. Tried to pay attention, couldn't keep up, but we'll have to review later. And so thank everybody out there on YouTube for your interesting comments. Sorry couldn't relay many of them over. Just, I guess I got to get more practice doing that.
No, did a great job. And yeah, thanks for those of you who are here on the chat room. Very informative. Nate, thanks for joining us as always. And we certainly look forward to your content and work in 2019. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex and Vance and Miguel and everyone in the chat room. It's always great to be here, and I wish you all the best.
All right. Well, thank you. Happy 2019, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Miguel. Thanks.
Good night, everyone. Good night.
Guys.
Good night.